What if the greatest mystery of your existence, the one question you've whispered to yourself in the dark, have I been here before, was never meant to be answered by mystics, prophets, or ancient priests, but by your own biology? For thousands of years, civilizations whispered about past lives, Egyptians, Tibetans, the Greeks, all hinting that the soul returns, again and again, carrying invisible memories. But what if the truth is much stranger and much closer than anyone ever imagined? Modern neuroscience has stumbled onto something extraordinary evidence that your body holds imprints of experiences you never lived, fears you never learned, instincts you were never taught. And deep within the mythic writings of Egypt's god of memory and measurement, Thoth, we find descriptions that eerily mirror what science is only now discovering. That your life is not a single straight line, but a continuum, a biological echo, a psychological inheritance, a spiritual fingerprint repeating through time. This is not about fortune-telling, not about mystical reincarnation fantasies. This is the story of how ancient myth and cutting-edge science collide to reveal a hidden truth about who you are, where you came from, and what destiny you keep returning to. And once you understand this truth, your patterns, your suffering, your talents, your coincidences, none of it will ever look random again. The truth never arrives all at once. It approaches slowly, like a shadow stretching across the floor long before the figure casting it ever appears. And your life, everything you call you, is the longest shadow your past has ever cast. You already feel it. In the way your instincts flare before your thoughts have time to form. In the way certain places feel familiar even when you've never walked their streets. In the way some fears grow in you like seeds that were planted long before you were born. We spend years trying to explain these things away, telling ourselves it's just imagination, coincidence, or some subconscious trick. But what if these echoes had a source? What if what you call your personality is a map that was drawn by hands you once had, in lifetimes you can no longer consciously remember? Science didn't mean to stumble into this mystery. It was an accident, as so many great discoveries are. Researchers studying trauma across generations found something impossible to ignore. Children, and even grandchildren, displaying emotional patterns shaped by events that never happened to them. Fears passed down like heirlooms. Preferences carried like invisible family relics. A generation that suffered famine produced descendants whose bodies hoarded calories. A generation that lived through war birthed children who flinched at loud noises, even without knowing why. At first, scientists called it inheritable trauma. Then, epigenetic memory. But if the body can carry emotional imprints from ancestors it never met, then the boundary between your life and their lives instantly blurs. Where does the past end? And where do you begin? At what point does a memory stop being yours? Civilizations long before ours didn't draw that boundary at all. They believed life was not a line, but a spiral, a pattern, a repetition. The Egyptians taught that a human was not a single biography, but a cycle of becoming. They believed your soul held multiple layers, like rings in a tree, each one representing a different stage of existence. And at the center of these layers was something Thoth described not as a mystical orb of light, but as a record, an imprint carved by every choice you ever made, across every lifetime you ever lived. They called it the Akh, the shining essence, the part of you that learned, returned, and refined itself over cycles of existence. Of course, you don't need to believe in reincarnation for any of this to matter. You just need to ask yourself one honest question. Why do the same patterns repeat in your life? Why do the same mistakes echo? Why do certain types of people appear again and again, as if drawn to you by some force you can't describe? If your current life is the only one you've ever lived, how do these patterns emerge with such precision, such inevitability? Because your past is not just historical, it is biological, emotional, symbolic, and maybe even spiritual. There is a moment, usually around early adulthood, when a person becomes aware of themselves as more than a personality and begins to sense themselves as a timeline. You start to realize certain desires were born before you ever acted on them, you start to feel certain wounds existed before anyone hurt you. You meet someone for the first time, yet something in you recognizes them instantly. Not logically, not romantically, primally. Like the way an animal recognizes a scent from long ago. And while science can explain these things through memory, association, or epigenetic inheritance, it cannot explain the feeling behind them. The strange interior certainty, the visceral pull. The Egyptians would say that is the residue of your past life, touching this one. But perhaps the most startling connection between ancient belief and modern science is the role of memory itself. Neuroscientists once believed memory lived only in the brain, stored like files, locked away in synapses. But now they know memory is distributed throughout the body. It is cellular, molecular, even immune systems remember. And when transplanted organs carry over fragments of personality preferences, impulses, emotional tendencies in patients who receive them, the scientific world hesitates. The spiritual world does not. Ancient Egyptians believed memory lived everywhere in the body, not just the mind. They said memory was a pattern woven into the flesh, repeated across lifetimes. They believed your habits, your desires, your fears, your gifts, these were not random. They were the continuity of your soul's previous attempts at this world. Not memories like photographs or stories, but memories like patterns, habits, tendencies, lessons. Who taught you to love the way you do? Who taught you to fear the way you do? Why do some things feel like home to you instantly while others feel foreign no matter how many years you spend with them? It's because your life is a continuation, not a beginning. This is why certain people shift the course of your life the moment they enter it. You're not meeting them, you're remembering them. This is why certain places fill you with emotions you can't explain, even if the history books say nothing important ever happened there. Something happened there to you, or through you, or before you. You feel it because your body is older than your birth. Your consciousness is newer than your bones. And this is the part most people never realize. If you carry the unfinished stories of your past, you also carry the unfinished potential. The strengths you have developed, the talents you touched but never mastered, the callings you felt but never followed. These are not new desires, they're old ones resurfacing. Nothing in your soul is random. If this idea feels too strange, consider something simple. The fear of heights is one of the most common human phobias. Yet, throughout most of human history, falling from great heights was not a typical daily risk. So why does it exist so deeply in us? Why are we terrified of something that most of our ancestors rarely experienced? Some scientists argue the fear is older than humanity, that it belongs to a time when our evolutionary ancestors lived in trees. Memories that predate our species, lives before our lives. If the body can remember millions of years ago, is remembering 50,000 years ago really such a stretch? And if it can remember experiences from before your birth, could it also remember ones from before your consciousness entered this particular body? That is the question no scientist can answer and no mystic can ignore. In the Egyptian worldview, death was never an ending. It was a continuation of consciousness passing through different forms, shaped by the lessons left unfinished. Thoth himself, the god of writing, measurement, calculation, and memory, was seen as the keeper of continuity. Not just the recorder of events, but the architect of transformation. They believed he measured the weight of your heart not to judge you, but to understand what you had learned, and what you still needed to learn. Your life now, the one you're living as you listen to these words, is a return to the lessons your soul was once unable to master. That's why certain challenges appear again and again, not to punish you, but to complete something. And this is where modern psychology agrees more than it disagrees. Therapists see patterns of self-sabotage repeat across generations even when circumstances change. They see people recreate the same relationships, chase the same emotional wounds, reenact the same childhood injuries in adult form. We are all repeating something. Some of it inherited, some of it learned, some of it deeper than either. But imagine what becomes possible when you stop believing you're broken, and instead recognize you're unfinished. When you stop believing your struggles are flaws, and instead see them as fragments from a longer journey. When you stop saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What part of my story is returning now?" Because nothing returns without a purpose. The Egyptians believed you come back not just to learn, but to remember who you were before the world convinced you to forget. To reclaim what you already earned across lifetimes of struggle. To activate what lies dormant in your patterns, your instincts, your intuition. Some memories return in dreams, some in sudden desires, some in unexplained moments of grief, some in the way your heart aches when you see something ancient, as if you spent lifetimes there and left something unfinished. You are not imagining these things, you are remembering them. And the more you try to ignore these echoes, the louder they will become. This is why your life feels like it's pointing you towards something. Something you can't fully name but can't fully escape, because you've been here before, and your unfinished journey is calling you back. And that is where the real story begins. You've probably felt it, those strange moments when time seems to fold in on itself, when the present feels layered with something older, something deeper. You're standing somewhere ordinary, maybe a street corner or a quiet room, and suddenly that place doesn't feel new. It feels recognized, as if the air has texture, as if the light hits your skin in a way that stirs memory instead of sensation. But you dismiss it. You tell yourself it's déjà vu, a glitch in the brain, a temporary misfire. You reduce something profound into something accidental because that's what you were taught to do. You were taught to ignore the echoes, to silence the familiarity, to treat the oldest parts of you as errors. But what if they are not errors? What if these moments are the few times your mind steps aside and allows your soul to speak? Every life has a signature, a pattern of choices repeated over and over. Some people are drawn to solitude, others to chaos. Some gravitate toward leadership, even when they resist it. Some carry a grief so ancient it feels older than memory. Some have irrational kindness, generosity that seems to pour from a well they never built in this lifetime. And others have rage, wounds, or fears that cannot be traced to any moment in their personal history. Where do these traits come from? Why do we arrive in this world already formed in ways we cannot explain? Science gives one answer: genetics. You are a tapestry stitched together from the threads of your ancestors. But genetics alone cannot explain why two siblings raised in the same home by the same people, exposed to the same environment, can have emotional universes that barely overlap. One carries the storm, the other floats in peace. One feels weight in every breath. The other moves through life as if gravity barely applies to them. Genes cannot explain the instincts you're born with, nor can they explain the ancient familiarity you feel with certain cultures, certain eras, certain philosophies you were never exposed to. That familiarity is not learned, it is remembered. Ancient Egyptians believed that every life you live leaves impressions in your soul, the same way footsteps leave impressions in sand. And when you reincarnate, those imprints don't disappear. They become part of your subconscious architecture. They shape the way you respond to life long before you realize it's happening. In modern terms, it's the emotional memory encoded in your nervous system, behavioral tendencies wired into your limbic structures, subtle influences passed through epigenetic signals. Science and spirituality often describe the same reality with different languages. What one calls ancestral memory, the other calls the unfinished business of the soul. You may not remember your past in images or stories, but you remember it in reactions. Perhaps you've always been drawn to the ocean, even though you grew up far from it. The Egyptians believed this could be the memory of a lifetime spent near water, or a symbolic echo of emotional depths you once mastered. Modern science might say your nervous system is wired to calm itself through fluidity, or that your physiology thrives in environments associated with peace in your inherited lineage. Both explanations point to the same truth: something older than your biography is shaping your desires. Or maybe you have a fear that makes no sense, like fire, or crowds, or silence. Rationally, you know these things cannot harm you. Yet something deeper recoils, something ancient that reacts before thought intervenes. This is where the lines between past life memory and evolutionary inheritance blur. A fear born from trauma generations ago can pass into your DNA. A fear born from personal trauma in another life can pass into your present experience. And a fear born in the early evolution of your species can echo today. You cannot separate these layers because they all live in the same vessel, the human form. And the human form remembers everything. You are a combination of 3 timelines: the biological, the emotional, and the spiritual. Each one carries memories. Together, they create the life you think is random, but is anything but. Of the 3, the spiritual timeline is the one modern science does not fully understand, but it stumbles into its evidence constantly. Children who recall details of events they never witnessed. People who demonstrate inexplicable talents the first time they attempt something. Savants who play instruments they've never been taught. Individuals who speak languages they've never heard. There is always a scientific explanation offered: coincidence, cryptomnesia, pattern recognition. And those explanations hold weight, but they don't explain the feeling behind it. The certainty, the naturalness, the way the skill feels, not learned, but recognized. Recognition is the soul remembering itself. In ancient Egypt, the process of remembering was sacred. They believed that the purpose of reincarnation was not simply to live again, but to awaken to what you already knew. Memory was not an archive, it was a path, and those who remembered their past were considered closer to wisdom, closer to mastery, closer to becoming an a fully illuminated soul. But here is the piece most people never hear. Egyptians did not believe remembering your past lives came automatically. They believed you had to earn that awareness by completing the lessons of your current life. Only then could the memories behind it rise to the surface. You are not supposed to remember everything all at once because your consciousness couldn't bear it. It would be like remembering every heartbreak you ever lived on the same day, or every betrayal, or every joy too powerful to endure twice. So your past lives stay underground until your present life becomes strong enough to open the door. Some of those memories are emotional, appearing as patterns. Some are psychological, appearing as intuitions. Some are physical, appearing as sudden strengths or unexplained weaknesses. And some are relational, appearing as soul connections that feel deeper than logic allows. The first time you meet someone and feel instantly comfortable, that is not just chemistry, it's continuity. A relationship begun long before this body, finding its way back to you. And the first time you meet someone who triggers something dark or fearful in you without reason, that is also continuity. A bond left unresolved, returning for resolution. Every person you meet is part of your story, but some carry chapters you haven't read yet. You've struggled with certain wounds your whole life: the fear of abandonment, the fear of failure, the fear of being unseen. But what if these wounds didn't start here? What if they were the unfinished lessons of a story you've lived before? And what if the moment you understand that, everything changes? Because once you stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what part of my past is this trying to heal? You become powerful in a way most people never experience. The mind tries to understand life horizontally, past to present, present to future. The soul moves vertically through layers, through depths, through patterns, repeated in different lifetimes. When you sense déjà vu, when you feel pulled towards someone or something, when you experience a moment of clarity that feels older than you, it's your vertical memory aligning with your horizontal timeline. You think you're living one life? You're actually living all of them at once. Not literally, but symbolically, emotionally, energetically. Every choice you make now is shaped by choices made in the past you can no longer consciously recall. And every breakthrough you achieve in this life frees you from patterns that may have existed for centuries. This is why breakthrough moments feel like liberation. Not small victories, but soul-level revolutions. When you change a pattern, you are not just healing this life, you are healing every life tied to that pattern. And maybe that is why you were drawn to this message. Not by accident, not by curiosity, but by recognition. Something in you knows this is not new information. You're not learning, you're remembering. Your past is not behind you. It is inside you, waiting, whispering, guiding. And the deeper you go into that truth, the more your life will begin to make sense. There comes a moment in every life when the questions you've been avoiding start demanding answers. You feel it like a quiet pressure at the back of your mind, a subtle tug in your chest, a sense that some invisible thread is pulling you towards something you can't yet name. It doesn't announce itself with thunder. It whispers. It nudges. It repeats the same patterns until you finally stop running long enough to ask the only question that matters: why does this keep happening to me? And without realizing it, you stand on the threshold of remembering. Because the moment you ask that question, truly ask it, you step out of the illusion that your life is random. The patterns that follow you are not curses, they are invitations. Echoes from stories you began in lifetimes long before this one. The conflict that keeps repeating is not coincidence, it is a cycle seeking completion. Your soul keeps returning to the same lessons until you finally understand what they are trying to teach you. And once you do, the pattern dissolves like dust in your hands. Think of your life as a wheel. Every fear, every desire, every relationship, every obstacle, each one is a spoke on that wheel. And as it turns, you revisit them again and again. Not because you are trapped, but because you are being shaped. The Egyptians believed the soul evolved by repeating its lessons with increasing awareness. You don't come back to suffer. You come back to refine, to sharpen the edge of your consciousness until it becomes impossible for you to remain asleep to yourself. And if you look closely at your life, you'll see it. The same emotional themes appearing in different forms. The same wounds dressed in new faces. The same choices disguised as new opportunities. How many times have you trusted someone who betrayed you? How many times have you denied your own voice to please others? How many times have you let fear dictate your destiny? These are not failures. They are continuations, incomplete chapters from your soul's earlier attempts. But here is the miracle. Awareness is the doorway through which the past finally releases its grip. When you become conscious of your patterns, you stop reliving your old lives and start writing a new one. Yet most people never make it to that level of awareness because they're taught to see life through a lens too narrow for the soul. They're told that their personality is the product of childhood experiences, their choices, the product of logic, their fears, the product of trauma, their desires, the product of environment. But the Egyptians saw the human story as far more layered. They believed your childhood shapes only the surface of your personality. Beneath that surface is a deeper architecture built across lifetimes. Modern psychology might call this subconscious imprinting. But even psychology cannot explain why a child is born serene or turbulent, shy or bold, wise or reckless. How can someone arrive in this world already carrying tendencies, preferences, even moral inclinations? Because you arrive with momentum from where you were before. You are not a blank slate. You are a continuation. And somewhere inside you lies a memory older than your birth certificate, older than your family name. You've lived as the warrior who died defending their belief, the healer who sacrificed themselves for others, the wanderer who never found belonging, the leader who misused power, the mother who lost a child, the child who never found their voice, the lover who was betrayed, the betrayer who lived with regret. Not literally every life, but symbolically, thematically. These archetypes live inside you because your soul has worn many shapes, each one leaving its imprint. And this is why certain fears paralyze you more than others. They're not new, they're echoes. This is why certain dreams feel like memories, they're fragments. This is why certain goals feel destined, they're continuations. The Egyptians believed your purpose in each lifetime is not chosen by chance, it is chosen by the unfinished work of your previous incarnations. Your soul doesn't chase what's random, it chases what's familiar. What's necessary, what's incomplete. You think you want success? Your soul wants redemption. You think you want love? Your soul wants recognition. You think you want safety? Your soul wants freedom. Life becomes easier when you understand which desire belongs to which part of you. Some people spend their whole lives searching for a purpose, but in truth, your purpose is already written in the patterns you cannot ignore. Look at what keeps calling you back. Look at what keeps breaking you open. Look at what keeps returning no matter how far you run. Your purpose is hidden inside the cycle that repeats. The Egyptians had a word for this cycle, the Shen, a loop with no beginning and no end, symbolizing the eternal recurrence of experiences meant to refine the soul. They believed every lifetime is one rotation of that loop. But here's where science provides an unexpected bridge. Behaviorists discovered that human beings repeat emotional cycles across generations until someone becomes conscious enough to break them. A family line plagued by abandonment continues that pattern until someone chooses differently. A lineage marked by silence produces a voice powerful enough to shatter it. A heritage dominated by fear eventually births a soul fierce enough to face it. Breaking a generational cycle is not just healing your ancestors, it is healing your past lives too. Because the patterns of your soul and the patterns of your lineage often overlap. You reincarnate where your unfinished work can continue. The people you are born among are not random. They are companions from before. Allies, mirrors, sometimes challengers, but always connected. If you've ever felt like you were born into the wrong family, consider this. What if you chose them? Not because they were comfortable, but because they were necessary. Souls do not seek comfort, they seek growth. And the people who challenge you the most often shape you the deepest. The parents who wounded you awakened the lessons you needed to confront. The siblings who misunderstood you taught you the value of becoming your true self. The community that rejected you forced you onto the path of authenticity. Nothing is random, not even the harm. The Egyptians said the soul chooses the circumstances of each life with precision, like a sculptor choosing the stone that will best reveal the shape hidden within. You chose the life you are living because it contains the specific pressures needed to awaken your next evolution. Your hardships are not punishments, they are chisels. But understanding this requires a new way of seeing your life. Instead of asking, "Why me?" you start to ask, "What is this trying to awaken in me?" Instead of seeing failures as dead ends, you see them as the return of lessons not yet learned. Instead of seeing heartbreak as misfortune, you see it as the unraveling of old karmic ties. Instead of seeing fear as an obstacle, you see it as a threshold, because your soul becomes strongest at the boundary of fear. The Egyptians depicted this through the journey of the sun god Ra each night. As the sun descended into darkness, it faced the serpent Apophis, the embodiment of chaos. Ra was not meant to defeat the serpent once and for all, he was meant to face it every night. The message was simple. Growth is not achieved by avoiding darkness, but by encountering it repeatedly until you no longer fear it. This is the story of your life too. The darkness you face is not the enemy, it is the initiation. You confront the same fears again and again until you master them, and when you do, the pattern breaks. You awaken, you evolve, you rise. And perhaps the most powerful part of this truth is that the soul's evolution is not linear, it's spiral. Each time you repeat a pattern, you are not at the same point on the wheel. You are higher, more aware, more capable. Even when it feels like you've fallen back into the same mistake, you haven't. You're revisiting it with new strength. This means every heartbreak, every failure, every fear, every ending is not a setback but a return to yourself, a return to the lesson, a return to the place where transformation is possible. And you wouldn't be here reading these words if you weren't ready to transform something now. You know it. Somewhere inside, you feel the shift coming. A sense that something old is cracking open, something buried is rising, something forgotten is trying to surface. That's not anxiety, it's awakening. The soul vibrates differently when it's close to remembering. And the remembering has already begun. There is a moment in every deep transformation when the world around you starts to feel unfamiliar, as if someone tilted reality by a few degrees. Conversations that once felt normal now feel empty. Goals you once chased no longer excite you. People you once trusted begin to reveal their true roles in your story. Nothing external has changed, and yet everything feels different. This is what happens when your inner world begins shifting faster than your outer world can keep up. It's the first sign that a past life cycle is nearing completion. You begin noticing subtle signs, patterns breaking apart, synchronicities clustering around you, dreams becoming more vivid, emotions rising with no logical trigger. It's like the soul starts pushing memories through the cracks in your consciousness, not as images, but as feelings. You don't remember the past life itself. You remember the unfinished emotion attached to it. You don't recall the specific events. You recall the unresolved meaning. That is how reincarnation works, not through memory, but through resonance. The emotional thread continues even when the story changes. You might feel nostalgia for things you've never experienced. You might fear situations you've never lived. You might love someone with an intensity that defies explanation. These experiences are not accidents, they are echoes. Every soul carries 3 types of echoes: emotional, relational, and purpose-driven. And as you evolve, these echoes grow louder. The emotional echoes show up as themes that keep resurfacing: abandonment, rejection, guilt, longing, courage, freedom. If you pay attention, you will notice that the same emotion has followed you through every major chapter of your life. Not because you're cursed, but because that emotion is the lock you were born to open. Once it opens, the entire cycle dissolves. Relational echoes are even more mysterious. Some people enter your life, and you feel like you've known them forever. Others enter and trigger you without reason. Some inspire you instantly. Some drain you immediately. The Egyptians believe this is because souls travel in groups, meeting again and again to continue old contracts. Sometimes to heal them, sometimes to resolve them, sometimes simply to witness each other's growth. Not every connection is meant to stay, but every connection is meant to reveal something. And then there are the purpose echoes, the deep inner impulses that guide your life even when you resist them. The pull towards certain skills, certain environments, certain challenges. You may not understand why writing feels like breathing, or why healing others feels like remembering, or why leadership feels familiar even if you fear it. These tendencies did not begin in this lifetime. They are the continuation of roots planted long ago. When all 3 echoes activate at once, your soul is preparing for a breakthrough. You feel it as restlessness, as urgency, as a desire to shed your old identity. This is the cusp of evolution, the moment when your past lives begin to loosen their hold, not by being forgotten, but by being integrated. Because awakening is not about remembering who you were before, it's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Yet this transition is not gentle. Awakening has a way of dismantling the structures that kept you comfortable. The Egyptians saw this as the necessary destruction before rebirth. Just as the sun must set before it rises, the old self must fall before the new one can emerge. You may lose friends, but only the ones attached to your former self. You may quit a job, but only because your soul can no longer tolerate misalignment. You may change direction entirely, not because you're lost, but because you finally recognize the path you were meant to walk. Transformation demands sacrifice, not suffering, but release. You cannot carry the weight of who you were into the life you are becoming. The patterns, the fears, the expectations of others, they all fall away. And while this can feel like loss, it is actually liberation. But most people never understand. The moment you release the old pattern, the cycle snaps. You step out of the karmic loop. The lesson ends. And for the first time in lifetimes, you experience a moment of true stillness. A kind of silence inside you, where the past is no longer pulling at your future. This stillness is the beginning of real choice. You may not realize how rare true choice is. Most people think they are choosing freely, but they are choosing from their conditioning, their fears, their past life momentum. Only when you dissolve the echo can you choose from awareness. This is where your life stops, being a repetition, and becomes a creation. In this stillness, something extraordinary happens. New possibilities appear. Possibilities that were always meant for you but could not enter your life until the old cycle cleared. Opportunities aligned with your soul instead of your wounds. Relationships aligned with your growth instead of your stagnation. Paths aligned with your destiny instead of your fears. And now, something else becomes possible too. The emergence of the one memory your soul has been waiting to give you. Not a past life scene, not a vision, but a realization. The recognition of the pattern you have finally completed. The Egyptians called this the moment of the heart's unwaiting. When the soul becomes light enough to rise, this is not poetic. It is psychological, emotional, and spiritual. It is the release of the burden you have carried across lifetimes, the forgiveness you never thought you'd reach, the self-compassion you never believed you deserved, the truth you were afraid to see. The moment you understand that you were never broken, you were unfolding. And when you reach that moment, something inside you shifts permanently. You don't become someone new. You become someone whole, someone who remembers without clinging, someone who feels without drowning, someone who sees without fear, someone who loves without needing, someone who lives without repeating. This is where the story of your past lives stops dictating the story of your current one. The Egyptians believed that the soul, once it reaches this level of awareness, begins writing a different kind of destiny. Not one based on karma, but on intention. Not one based on cycles, but on creation. Not one based on returning to the old patterns, but on exploring new ones. This is where you begin choosing your life from a place of clarity. You choose partners with purpose, not desperation. You choose opportunities with authenticity, not approval-seeking. You choose paths that nourish your evolution, not your ego's fears. And as you grow, the world responds. Because the outer world is always a reflection of the inner shift. But here is something most people overlook. Once you break a cycle, life will test you. Not to punish you, but to confirm your transformation. A familiar temptation will reappear. A familiar fear will rise. A familiar person may return. And in that moment, how you respond determines whether the cycle truly ends or resets. React from your old self, and the pattern returns. Respond from your awakened self, and the door closes forever. And once it closes, something remarkable happens. You feel a strange familiarity with your future. Not because you've lived it before, but because your soul recognizes the path it finally has the freedom to walk. This is the beginning of a new cycle, one not defined by the past, but by possibility. You are not meant to stay trapped in old narratives. Your soul is too ancient and too resilient to remain bound by what came before. You are meant to rise, to expand, to create a life that reflects the fullness of who you've become. And deep inside, you already know you're ready. The pull you feel right now, the curiosity, the resonance, the sense of recognition is not accidental. It is your soul signaling that you have reached the threshold, that the old cycle is preparing to break, that something dormant is waking, that your next evolution is waiting for you. And the journey into that evolution begins with the next part of this story. There is a moment in every awakening when the past stops chasing you and the future begins calling you. It doesn't happen loudly. It comes as a quiet shift inside you, a subtle rearranging of your inner landscape. Something that once felt heavy suddenly feels lighter. Something that once felt confusing begins to make sense. Something that once felt impossible now feels inevitable. And you realize you are no longer being pulled backward, you are being guided forward. What you feel now is not imagination, it's alignment. The Egyptians believed that when the soul completes a karmic cycle, it emits a different frequency, one that attracts new paths, new connections, new realities. They called this shift the rising of the Ka, the moment when your life force expands beyond the constraints of your old identity. Modern psychology might call it self-actualization. Physics might call it coherence. But whatever language you use, the experience is unmistakable. You begin to feel like the person you were meant to become. Yet this transition is delicate. In the space between who you were and who you are becoming, the world feels strangely silent. Old desires may fade, old relationships may drift. Old versions of you may no longer fit. At first, this feels like loss. But if you listen closely, you'll realize something else is happening. You're making room. Space is opening where the future can enter. The Egyptians taught that in this quiet space, the soul receives its next set of instructions. Not as words, but as impulses, subtle nudges, intuitive knowing. You may feel drawn to new places, new ideas, new people, new dreams. Not because you're escaping anything, but because your destiny is shifting its coordinates. Your soul is turning its face toward a horizon it had long forgotten. And this is where the true journey begins. You see, the greatest secret the Egyptians held was not just about past lives, it was about future ones. They believed you could shape the trajectory of your soul's next incarnations through the choices you make now. Not by denying your humanity, but by living with awareness. Every decision you make in this lifetime plants the seeds for your next. Every act of courage shapes the blueprint of the soul you will become. Every moment of self-awareness breaks the chain of cycles you have carried for centuries. This is why awakening feels urgent. Not because time is running out, but because time is expanding. You are no longer living as a fragment of who you were. You are now living as the architect of who you will be. And as you step deeper into this awareness, something remarkable happens. The world begins to mirror your inner expansion. You start noticing signs everywhere, numbers repeating, dreams aligning, conversations synchronizing in ways that feel impossible to dismiss. This is not superstition. It is resonance. When your inner world becomes coherent, the outer world responds by rearranging itself around your new frequency. You may meet someone who feels destined. You may stumble into an opportunity that feels pre-written. You may discover a passion that feels like remembering. These are not coincidences. They are activations. Soul-level signals that you are entering a new chapter, a chapter not dictated by the past, but chosen by your consciousness. But before the new path fully reveals itself, there is one final challenge the Egyptians believed every soul must face. The test of truth. The test of truth is simple, yet profound. You must answer one question with absolute honesty. What do you truly want? Not what you were told to want. Not what your past wounds conditioned you to want. Not what your fears trick you into wanting, but what your soul longs for. This question is harder than it seems, because most people spend their entire lives avoiding it. They chase goals that impress others, not goals that awaken themselves. They pursue relationships that feel familiar, not relationships that nourish their expansion. They cling to identities they outgrew long ago, afraid of who they might become without them. But when you reach this stage of awakening, hiding from your truth becomes impossible. Your old desires crumble, your old motivations fade. You begin to see your life with startling clarity. You understand what drains you and what energizes you, what breaks you and what builds you, what aligns with your soul and what belongs to your past. And once you see your truth, you cannot unsee it. This is where most people feel fear. Not because truth is dangerous, but because truth is liberating. And liberation requires change. The Egyptians saw truth as the ultimate purification, not moral truth, but soul truth. The truth of your identity, the truth of your path, the truth of your purpose, the truth of your desires, and most importantly, the truth of what you must release in order to evolve. Because evolution is not an addition, it is a shedding. As you answer the question of what you truly want, you realize that the life you've been chasing may not reflect the soul you're becoming. You may have spent years pursuing achievements that no longer matter. You may have built relationships that no longer align with your future. You may have clung to dreams that belong to an earlier version of you. And recognizing this is not failure, it is freedom. Once you admit your truth, the universe begins shifting in ways both subtle and seismic. Paths that once felt blocked become clear. Doors that once felt closed begin opening. People who were never meant to stay begin fading. And slowly, you begin stepping into the life your soul had been guiding you toward from the beginning. But here's most people never expect. As you move toward your truth, your past selves begin to integrate. All the versions of you, from all your lifetimes, the warrior, the scholar, the healer, the seeker, the lover, the wanderer, begin merging into the person you are now. Their strength becomes your strength. Their mistakes become your wisdom. Their fears become your mastery. Their longing becomes your purpose. You become a composite of every lesson, every lifetime, every evolution your soul has undergone. And as this integration settles, something extraordinary happens. You begin to feel whole. not perfect, whole, a completeness that comes not from achieving anything external, but from remembering everything internal. It's a kind of inner fullness that cannot be taken by loss, shaken by fear, or dimmed by failure. It is the realization that you are not just living a life, you are continuing a legacy of lifetime. You are not just walking a path, you are walking the culmination of thousands of paths, and every step you take is echoed through the eternity of your soul. This is the beginning of true self-realization. Not the philosophical concept, but the lived experience of knowing who you truly are beneath the noise, beneath the conditioning, beneath the repetition of your cycles. The Egyptians believed that a soul who reached this state was no longer bound by karma. They became what they called Shen-Em-Ka, the soul that moves freely, without the weight of unfinished stories. And once you reach this level, something profound becomes clear. The life you are about to step into is not a continuation of your past. It is the first life in which you are fully awake. The decisions you make from this point forward are no longer dictated by fear. They are no longer echoes. They are no longer reactions. They are choices, conscious creations, the building blocks of a destiny shaped not by history, but by intention. You are entering a new era of your soul's journey. One where you are not the student of your past, but the author of your future. The moment you begin to step into this new life, you notice subtle shifts everywhere. It is not always dramatic at first. Sometimes, it is a faint tingling in your hands, a sudden clarity in your thoughts, a gentle ripple through your emotions that tells you something fundamental has changed. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations. Your body, mind, and soul are aligning with the new frequency you have chosen to inhabit. In ancient Egyptian texts, this stage was described as the unveiling of the Ka. The Ka is more than energy. It is the living blueprint of your soul. When it rises, it reorders your consciousness, guiding you toward situations, people, and choices that resonate with your highest potential. It is subtle, yet unmistakable. You will start noticing the doors opening that were always meant for you. The conversations that teach exactly what you need to know. The coincidences that feel orchestrated by something far beyond ordinary perception. And yet, there is one principle that governs all of this: awareness. You cannot summon your next life if you continue to move through each day as though asleep. Awareness is the lens through which the universe shows you the next step. It is the clarity that allows the chaos to flow freely. When you cultivate awareness, you see the patterns that previously eluded you. You notice the cycles in your relationships, your work, your emotions, even in the physical world around you. You begin to recognize where you are repeating old loops, where old energies are still influencing your present, and how to consciously choose a different outcome. The Egyptians were masters of this practice. They did not simply meditate, they observed. They recorded. They mapped their inner worlds as meticulously as they mapped the stars. And in doing so, they learned to trace the trajectory of the soul across lifetimes. Every habit, every emotion, every choice left a mark. A subtle imprint that could echo for centuries if left unexamined. But they also knew that these imprints could be healed, rewritten, and transformed. That is the truth no one ever told you about past lives. They are not chains, they are tools. They are instructions. They are the materials with which you construct the next version of yourself. As you begin to see your past lives for what they really are, the fear and mystery surrounding them begin to dissolve. You realize that you are not a passive passenger, being buffeted by karmic fate. You are a conscious participant, capable of altering the course of your soul with every intentional act. You are capable of harvesting the wisdom of previous incarnations while releasing the weight of unresolved patterns. This is why the Egyptians invested so much in the study of consciousness. They understood that mastery over your past is mastery over your future. And here is where the most profound truth emerges. Every trauma, every heartbreak, every failure, every triumph you have experienced in this lifetime is a reflection of something your soul needed to understand. And when you begin integrating these experiences fully, When you stop running from them, resisting them, or judging them, something extraordinary happens. Your consciousness expands. You become capable of holding multiple layers of existence at once, the life you are living, the lives you have lived, the possibilities yet to come, all converging in a clarity that was once unimaginable. This is not a mystical concept. It is biological. Studies in epigenetics now show that experiences, thoughts, and emotions leave chemical markers on DNA that influence how genes express themselves. In other words, the wisdom and patterns of your past lives are not just metaphors, they are encoded in your very cells. When you approach these memories with conscious awareness, you are literally rewriting the expression of your DNA. You are signaling to your body that the old cycles no longer define you. You are instructing your cells to operate from a state of freedom rather than repetition, from regeneration rather than decay. The Egyptians also understood that integration requires release. You cannot carry the past forward without transformation. You must consciously let go. You must forgive, not for anyone else, but for yourself. You must acknowledge the mistakes and triumphs alike and allow them to settle into the soil of your soul, where they become nutrients for growth rather than weeds of limitation. And when you do this, your energy begins to move differently. The heaviness of unresolved history lifts. The old emotional residues that once dictated your behavior begin to dissolve. You feel lighter, more capable, more aligned with the flow of life itself. From this space, your future lives begin to shape themselves, not as unknown mysteries, but as intentional creations. The Egyptians called this the weaving of Neter. Neter is the life force, the cosmic intelligence that flows through every atom of creation. When you consciously work with it, you are no longer subject to the randomness of chance. You begin to co-create experiences that serve your highest evolution. Your career, your relationships, your purpose all start to converge in a way that feels inevitable, yet entirely your own doing. But there is a caution here. The path of awakening is not linear. You will encounter resistance. Old patterns will surface just as quickly as they dissolve. You may feel doubt, fear, or even despair. These are not signs of failure, they are signs of the soul doing its work. Each time an old memory, pattern, or belief arises, it is an opportunity, a doorway to transform what once limited you into the fuel for your next level of consciousness. The Egyptians had a saying, "That which is known must be transformed, that which is hidden must be revealed." This is your invitation to do exactly that. And when you embrace this process, something miraculous occurs. Your perception of time itself changes. Past, present, and future stop feeling like separate domains. You begin to inhabit a continuum of consciousness where every choice resonates through every moment. You feel less trapped by history, less anxious about what is to come, and more fully alive in the now. Your life becomes an art form, and you are both the artist and the canvas. By now, you may realize that this is not just about understanding your past lives, it is about mastering them. Each past incarnation carries lessons, gifts, and warnings that, when integrated, amplify your present existence. You begin to see the patterns that once repeated unconsciously and can consciously redirect them. Where you once would have reacted out of fear, you now respond with clarity. Where you once would have felt lost, you now move with intention. Where you once would have been controlled by the echoes of others' expectations, you now assert your sovereignty. This is the final truth. Your past lives were never meant to enslave you. They were never meant to trap you in cycles of guilt, shame, or unworthiness. They were meant to teach you how to transcend them, to show you that every moment of suffering, every moment of triumph, every experience, whether joyful or painful, was a step toward remembering the fullness of who you are. And once you remember, nothing external can dictate your inner state. You become free, truly free. And this freedom is contagious. As you embody it, you radiate a frequency that others cannot ignore. You become a guide, a beacon, a living testament that transformation is not only possible, it is inevitable for those willing to do the work. Your presence awakens others, not by preaching, not by convincing, but simply by being the proof that a conscious, integrated life is real. So here is the invitation. Begin now. Start by acknowledging the patterns of your past. Observe them without judgment. Trace them back through your memories, through your feelings, through your lineage, through your past lives if you are ready. See them as lessons, not chains. Integrate them as wisdom, not weight. And then, step into the life your soul has been guiding you toward. Live with intention. Act with awareness. Move with purpose. Each choice is a brushstroke on the canvas of your next existence. And remember, this journey is ongoing. It does not end with insight, nor with understanding, nor even with liberation from the past. It continues as long as you live, expand, and evolve. Every breath, every decision, every act of courage propels your soul forward. Every act of awareness opens a doorway for the next chapter. And every moment of integration brings you closer to the full embodiment of your infinite self. Now, ask yourself, are you ready to step fully into this truth? To embrace your past not as a cage, but as a library of wisdom? To integrate every lesson, release every residue, and rise as a soul that is fully sovereign over its destiny? To claim the life your future selves have been waiting for? The choice is yours. You have the knowledge, you have the insight, you have the clarity. Now, act. Begin the practice of conscious reflection, daily integration, and intentional creation. Walk through life as a living testament to the truth you have discovered. Speak your truth. Embody your truth. Live your truth. Because the final revelation is this: your past lives were never secrets to keep. They were keys to unlock the full potential of your existence. The moment you step into this understanding, the chains of limitation dissolve. The path ahead becomes luminous, and your soul remembers finally, completely who it has always been, and who it is meant to become. Take that step today. Begin your awakening, and let the world witness the extraordinary transformation that only a conscious, sovereign soul can manifest. If you've absorbed even a fraction of what you've just learned, it's time to act. Don't let this knowledge remain just words in your mind, make it real in your life. Begin the practice of conscious reflection today. Take 5 minutes each morning to connect with your inner self, release the patterns that no longer serve you, and step fully into your sovereignty. Share this wisdom with someone you care about who is ready to awaken. Comment below with the insights that resonate most with you, and subscribe to continue uncovering the secrets your soul has been waiting for. Your transformation begins the moment you choose to move. Don't wait another day. Step into your power, reclaim your life, and let your past lives guide you toward a future beyond imagination.